Okay, in this video I want to talk about some of the material that's on pages 49 and 50, and I'll go over these same slides that I have here in class, but if you want to familiarize yourself with this material, which is probably a good idea, if you want to familiarize yourself with it before class, then you can watch this short video. Okay, so let's begin here with something that's not actually in the book, but you all know already what an argument is. So here we have an argument, premises, two premises. First one is, if Mary goes to the store, then she will get milk. The second one is, Mary went to the store, and our conclusion is, Mary got milk. So if these two premises are true, and it might be helpful to think about premise 1 here. So this first premise you can think of as basically a rule that if Mary goes to the store, then she will get milk. And so if this premise is true, if this rule is in effect, and if the second premise is true, Mary went to the store, then does our conclusion have to be true? And the answer here is yes. So if these two premises are true in this kind of argument, and there are lots of arguments like this, where if our premises are true, then our conclusion does have to be true. Our conclusion is guaranteed to be true. And this is the type of argument which Appia refers to on page 49 as one where, this out. The conclusion logically follows from the premises. He mentions that several places on page 49. So in an argument where the conclusion logically follows, then we know that if the premises are true, then the conclusion has to be true. Okay, and just to compare that argument, here's another argument that you've already seen. And so here, if these three premises are true, does the conclusion have to be true? Okay, and the answer here is no. Even if the premises are true, the conclusion doesn't have to be true. And so even though this is a pretty good argument, it just happens to be one where the conclusion does not, as Appia says, logically follow. Okay, so going back to this argument, just one more thing I want to point out about it. In this particular argument, you may have noticed that it has this particular form. Our first premise says, if Mary goes to the store, then she will get milk. And so we can say that the structure of this first sentence is, if A, then B. Mary goes to the store is A. She will get milk is B, and then you'll notice that our second premise, Mary went to the store, is, well, except for a change in tense, is the same thing as this here. Mary goes to the store. It's A. So our premise, our premises are if A then B, or the structure of our premises are if A then B, and then A, and our conclusion, you'll notice, is, again, except for a change in tense, is B. So any argument that has this structure, if A then B, for premise 1, premise 2 is A, and the conclusion is B, any argument that has that structure is one where the conclusion logically follows from the premises, or one where if the premises are true, then the conclusion is guaranteed to be true. Okay, so here's another argument, and this actually gets into some of the material on page 49. So you'll see this is the same as the argument we were just looking at, except we have I know in beginning all of our sentences here. So if I know that if Mary goes to the store, then she will get milk, and I also know that Mary went to the store, then do I know that Mary got milk? And the answer there is yes. If I do know both conclusions, or excuse me, both both premises. If I do know both premises, then I also know the conclusion. Okay, and just the term for this principle that makes this the case, if I know the premises, then I know the conclusion, is the deductive closure principle. Okay, now if you look on page 50, you'll see that, or what you have on page 50 there, there's a large paragraph there in the center of the page, which admittedly is a paragraph that looks kind of confusing, but all that Appia is doing in that paragraph is just demonstrating why this deductive closure principle is, why it's correct, why it is the case that if I know two premises, and if it's the case that the conclusion follows logically from those two premises, then that I know the conclusion. Why is that principle correct? And it's actually pretty straightforward. It just breaks down into three parts. Recall, of course, that knowledge is, for instance, if you look on page 47, in order to have knowledge, you have to have a belief. The belief has to be true, and you have to have, well, some kind of justification for the belief, whether that justification is indefeasible evidence or some other kind of justification. Your belief has to be justified. And so those three things are just the background for this deductive closure principle. So if it's the case that, actually let's skip that, go to this. If our premises are true and the conclusion follows logically, then the conclusion has to be true. That's basically just stating what we talked about in the beginning. If I'm justified in believing the premises and the conclusion follows logically from the premises, then I'm justified in believing the conclusion. Again, that's pretty straightforward. And should I go back to this one? This one is actually not quite as straightforward. So it's possible, you can imagine, where someone might have these two beliefs. And so by belief we just mean, the mental state that we talked about in chapter 1. So it's possible someone could have this belief: if Mary goes to the store, then she will get milk. It's also possible that someone could have this belief: Mary went to the store, and just for whatever reason be lacking this belief here. Just the mental state wasn't in their mind. So it's possible that someone could believe the premises and then just simply not, for whatever reason, believe the conclusion. But nevertheless, if someone had these two beliefs, this one here and this one here, then certainly that person would be entitled to believe this conclusion, a conclusion that follows logically from the premises, from those other two beliefs that they have. So as long as someone does have the belief, then the deductive closure principle holds. Okay, and then just returning to the focus on the justification, that part of the deductive closure principle, the justification part, is so important that it gets its own name, the principle of deduction for justification, which just says that if you have premises that you're justified in believing and the conclusion follows logically, then you're justified in believing the conclusion.